OMAKASE, The Life and Words of author M. Karen. If this is our first time meeting each other, let me give you a brief introduction. My name is Max. I write books for a living. My pronouns are they, them, and welcome to my Writing Advice and Inspiration podcast. If you're new, here's the way this show works. It is broken into 3 segments. My week, where I talk about my creative process and what I have been doing in the last 7 days. Viewer questions, where I cover 2 questions. Today we have a double feature on characters. And the last segment is the prompt. A weird, fun character exercise to help you stretch your creative muscles. Also, I know that I say this every week, but every podcast is somebody's first podcast, so I gotta let you know that in the description of this video and podcast, there is a bunch of handy links, including the song that you hear at the beginning and at the end of the show. And so, let's begin with my week. What have I been doing? What have I been writing? What have I been working on? Now, first off, I want to apologize if my voice sounds a little funny today. I honestly think that I'm getting sick again, which is funny because clearly what I need right now in probably the busiest weeks of my year is to get sick again. In case you don't know, I'm recording this at the beginning of May, and at the end of May is the only convention that I go to every single year, FanimeCon in beautiful San Jose, California. If you would like to meet me, good luck! Find me. I don't know. If you happen to be going to San Jose, I don't know. Add me on Twitter, yell at me, send me an email, maybe we could meet up, I don't know. I always make that offer, and I sometimes meet people, but nearly every year, I get 90% of the replies are like, oh my god, I was so busy, and the truth is, I was busy too. Cons are a busy time. That silliness out of the way, I would like to extend that offer to anyone who might be in the San Jose area, or attending FanimeCon themselves. Add me on Twitter, let me know where you'll be at, I'll let you know where I'll be at, I'll be tweeting about that stuff, and if you want to meet up, say hi, I'll give you a hug, I will sign your Pokemon cards, probably the best place to find me is actually at the swap meet on Thursday night, because that's we always go there. And it's an enclosed space, so you're likely to run into me and my lovely wife just picking through Pokemon cards because she has to finish her collection. So yeah, FanimeCon. I've been really busy. Last Friday, my brother and a few family members, and of course my wife, we went to see Avengers Endgame. And I'm not going to tell you about Avengers Endgame because probably you all seen it. I mean, listen, I'm the slowpoke. I am the person who takes years to watch things. So if I watched Avengers Endgame a week after it came out, you have all seen it. You all know how that went. No need to talk about it. But my brother made the awful, horrible mistake of reminding me that Fanime is 3 weeks away. That is not enough time to finish. That is not enough time to do all the things I need to do. Do you understand how that is a problem? So, my life is hell right now. That's not true. I'm being overly dramatic for the sake of humor. I have a lot of things I need to do. This novel has to get finished. This novel has to get finished before Fanime. And I will. I will have a bunch of writing days coming up. But that has been my personal little hell. A lot of work, a convention coming up. Exciting stuff, fun stuff. But as anyone who knows what it's like to go to a convention, especially if you're self-employed, you have to, put a lot of extra work just to have the stuff that usually goes up on time go up on time while you're gone. But for now, what else have I been doing? What else has my life been about? Well, as part of my new routine, I actually graduated. That's a silly way to say it. I had been working on, for the last couple of months, I had been working on completely destroying and annihilating my Twitter/social media addiction. Over the course of the last year, I deleted my Facebook, I deleted a bunch of other places, And in the course of the last couple of months, I reduced my time spent on Twitter to basically 10 to 15 minutes every day. And sometimes not even that. Most of the time I spent my social media time, I'm holding quotation fingers, social media time, I spend it just thinking of a post to schedule for the next day. And I know what you're thinking. That's crazy. I could never do that. I need to check on all the things that are happening on Twitter. Max, how do you survive not knowing about the tweets, about what's going on in the world? And the thing is, it's real easy. It's real easy when you don't care. But it's pushed me into checking in on friends more often. Like, really, when I go into Twitter for like my 10 minutes of time that I'm allowed to check social media, because otherwise I would spend, let me rephrase that, because otherwise I would waste a lot of time doing that. I check on my friends, I check on the people that I whose content I really enjoy. So I'm like, okay, what's Charles up to? What's Kendra up to? What's this person up to? Is Ben Prunty still following me back? Good. And then I just close it and I move on with my life. It's easy. As you do. If anyone is interested in reducing their time using social media, I would strongly recommend you to allocate time in your day to actually look at social media and actually set up a timer and say for the next 20 minutes I can look at Twitter. And additionally, replace the time that you would spend on Twitter or, on social media doing something else. Someone recommended to me to just have books everywhere around the house, which I was already doing. So I have like a book at my desk, a book in the living room, a book in the bathroom, a book in the kitchen. And whenever I would get the urge to check Twitter, I would just open up a book and read a couple pages or so. Which brings me to my next point. I've been reading a ton of books since the last time we talked. I've pushed my reading goals into the foreground, and I've been reading so much. It's been great. I know this is going to be a weird thing to say, but the best part of letting go of Twitter, of social media, is that I have this extra time that I can spend doing things that I really enjoy. And not to get super real right now, though, this is my podcast, and you know how this goes. But I always felt like I wasted a lot of time on Twitter. And I would come out of Twitter feeling awful, feeling crappy, feeling like, I don't want to say feeling bummed, because there are things in this world that are unfortunate and things that need change, and that's fair. But I found that coming out of Twitter like that really hindered my creative ability. And at the end of the day, I'm here to tell stories. And you know what else fits into enabling me to tell stories? Reading books. Consuming books. All kinds of books. One of the funny things is that since I didn't grow up in the United States, there's a bunch of children novels that I never read. My wife and I actually picked up an old copy of Matilda by Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl? And I had never read it. And I'm already I devoured half of it in a couple hours. It's been fun. It's been actually fun. If anything, because the opening pages of Matilda really feel like Roald Dahl wanted to go out of his way to tell you that he hates children. Which, mood, but... But anyhow, I've been really silly. But you know what I've been doing? Less time on social media, writing more, spending more time with my lovely wife, and reading more books. Listen, the other day I made a post on Twitter about how my plan was to read every book in my to-read pile, and then I was going to take over the world, and no one was going to be able to stop me. And then, of course, longtime follower and supporter, Lacey, replied at me with that gif of sure thing, Jan. And man, that cut deep. That cut deep. I was like, I know I'm never gonna finish this to read pile. I bought 3 books this week. I'm reading 2 of them, but still. Reading books is fun. Hey guys. Now this is an extended my week. We haven't had one of those in a little bit, but hey. I hope you enjoyed listening to what I've been up to. why don't we just take a second real quick to talk about the people who make this show possible? My podcast is here thanks to you, the wonderful people supporting me through coffee.com/mkaren and patreon.com/mkaren. If you like what I make and you want to just send me a little something, especially to help me pay for the convention fees, then coffee.com, that is ko-fi.com/mkaren, link below, is the #1 place to do so. You can treat me to a one-time donation, a cup of coffee, or a cup of tea. The other way to support me is through Patreon. If you pledge $1 a month, you can get early access to this podcast. Now, with that said, I want to give a shout out to one of my most generous patrons, Rival Moonlight. Rival Moonlight has a DeviantArt page. You can find out more about his writing and his art over at deviantart.com/rivalmoonlight. And so, let us continue with the rest of the show. Let's go into questions. I have 2 questions for you. One I got from my email, one I got from Tumblr, and they came with such perfect timing. 2 questions coming at the same topic from 2 different angles, and I am excited to talk about it. The topics today are going to be all about character. But before we start with that, I want to let you know that the following you're about to hear is my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel. Instead, take it as the ramblings of a silly person who sounds a little bit like this. There's a throwback for you. If you haven't, I haven't done that bit in like years. Oh man, shoutouts to everyone who watched my original videos on YouTube. Anyhow, I wanted to start with, I don't want to call it the beginner's version of this, but it's a question that I haven't stopped to just talk about in ever. The kind of question that is left unspoken because I don't think that anyone has difficulty finding characters. More often than not, the problem with writers is that we have too many OCs, original characters, or just characters. But today I want to begin the question segment of the show with a simple question. How do you actually come up with characters for your story? And this here is an interesting process. Regardless of how you tackle fiction, this is an interesting proposition because there are writers that I know who painstakingly develop their characters before even thinking of the plot of the story. And I'm not saying that's wrong. That's just different. So I want to take a second to go over my process for how I come up with the characters in my stories. Though, in order to do that, we actually have to take a step back and I have to go over how I come up with stories in general. I am kind of at the point of my writing journey where I don't really sit down and I look for ideas for stories to write about. I have a list of story ideas that I've been saving for a long time. And more often than not, in the midst of living, I just throw more in there, you know. I go for a walk and I think of another story idea, and that goes in the pile of story ideas. A few of those story ideas, like the one you're going to hear about today, I just use as prompts. I may still write a story about it someday, but for now I think it's better, it serves a better purpose as a writing exercise for you guys to have fun with. So when I want to sit down to write, I look through the list, or I, more often than not, grab the one that I've been thinking about a lot from the list, and I ask myself a very simple question. What makes this story idea fun? And if you know my guide to how to plan a novel, then you know how these steps go. If you don't, I recommend you just go and look up the workshop. It's a 1-hour workshop of how I go through developing a novel. It's a relatively older video, But I mean, I feel like I still relate to everything I said there. It's a workshop. It's a 1-hour video. Settle in, get a cup of tea, and just, listen to Max from a couple of years ago explain their process. But that being said, part of my creative process after that is to look for the pieces of that story. Because a story ultimately takes place somewhere where something is happening, and it involves people. Places, events, people. And through this brainstorming process, sometimes it feels like I'm just doing like a casting call. Like I'm just looking for people to cast as the characters for this story. More often than not, a story demands a particular central character or a group of people in the center of the story. And since those people are part of the story themselves, then they just come with the package. But sometimes when I don't know who the main character is, I do a lot of brainstorming and think of the kind of story I'm going to be stepping into, and what kind of character would be in this kind of story. Now, this all kind of sounds wishy-washy, because it is. I mean, writing is strange, and writing is the act of discovery. So through the brainstorming process, I find myself slowly defining what the character looks like, sounds like, and behaves like in my mind. This is what I like to do during walks. I like to just think of the character, listen to music, imagine how they would behave, search for their voice. And when time comes to write, I let them change. Because more often than not, just like when you think you know someone in real life, you look at someone and you go, oh, I know what kind of person this guy over here is. And then you meet them and you realize, oh, you're not like I thought you would be. That doesn't always happen. I mean, let's be real. Sometimes you can judge a book by its cover. But that probably shouldn't be the way you go about doing things always. I have said it before, but I'm going to say it again. I spend the first third of the novel figuring out what characters sound like. Really, examining them while they are alive on the page. Because you can spend a lot of time brainstorming what a character looks like and behaves like, and doing character questionnaires and all these other things. And then when they're on the page, they can just shock you as easily as if you hadn't done any of that. So through my experience, I found to just, once I have an image of the character, once I can imagine them in my mind clearly, their appearance, their voice, I jump in, and I keep track of all the changes that happen throughout the story, to make sure that during revision, I make that character's voice, appearance, and behavior ring truly through the entirety of the story. That's just part of the writing process. The first draft is the first draft, and even if you do all the planning in the world, characters will surprise you, and you will have to go back and clean all of it up. But let's rewind back. You know now how my process goes. Think of the story, think of what characters the story needs, develop those characters, and jump in. What tips do I have for someone who is completely new to this, who has never written a story before, who has come up with characters, yes, but not characters for a particular story? What kind of tips and tricks can I offer to someone in that position? The first thing I want to say, and this may be probably the hardest thing to internalize, but remember that for the first draft, nothing is set in stone. Your characters can change, and there's nothing wrong with the outline being wrong. Sometimes you think a character is a particular way, and through the act of writing, you discover they're completely different. That's okay. That's not wrong. That's not you being a, quotation fingers, bad writer. If you look at every medium, writing, movies, video games, radio plays, whatever it is, any kind of fiction out there, everywhere you look, you're going to find stories of people who didn't find the right voice for their protagonist or their right appearance until several drafts in. This is normal. There's nothing wrong with this. So I would recommend not coming into the first draft looking at your outline like it's a kind of Bible. The character looks like this, and acts like this, and speaks like this, always. Maybe they do, and maybe they will. I would recommend, though, to keep it as a kind of guideline, just in case that characters decide to surprise you. Okay? With that as the baseline, don't worry too much about the first draft. Especially because I can assure you, you will have to revise the way that characters behave. I know that I do every time that I write a novel. Seldom have I finished the novel and thought, yup, the main character is going to require no revision throughout. That never happens, because writing is silly and weird. But that being said, let's move on. Another tip that I would recommend is to steer away from tropes. Just because the stories that we have consumed in the past contain characters that are a particular way or another, doesn't mean that you have to have characters who are that way in your stories. I have said this for years, but if you're writing a fantasy story, you don't have to have a dwarf in it, and you don't have to have an elf in it, and they don't have to hate each other. You don't have to do the stereotypical, archetypical thing that happens in stories. You can let your characters be who they are. I knew one certain writer in college who would treat TV tropes as like a kind of macro template, and this writer would just go through the whole TV tropes page for a particular genre or a particular like style of story, and would just be like, okay, I need the dark magical girl, and I need the childhood friend, and I need this, and I need that, and I can't think of a least fun way to go through a story than to just take all these archetypes and dump them into your story. That just seems very unfun to me. And also a little short-sighted, because the problem with tropes is that tropes are predictable. So unless you're playing with those tropes and doing different things with them, you're ultimately creating something a little predictable. Okay, so basic character advice for writers starting out. I took a little break, mostly because I started sneezing like crazy. I told you to let the characters change and to write them as they come, and revise later. To stay away from tropes, because they are predictable. You can play with tropes, but you gotta, do stuff with them. If you are just taking them, ultimately predictable story. The other thing I want to just slide under the door is to inject a little bit of humanity into your characters. Everyone is the protagonist of their own story. Everyone has a goal. Everyone wants something. And not everyone has, world-changing goals. Some people just want to live a peaceful life. Some people just want to be left alone. Some people want riches and gold, sure. And some people do want to change the world. But not everyone does. But everyone wants something. And this desire for change, not only within our immediate life, but also in the outside world. To live in a big house. To be respected by your peers. To earn the affection of that certain someone. These are not what you may call selfless goals, but they are nonetheless human, and every one of us has a desire, something that we stay up at night thinking about. And even if your character is a background character, and even if it's someone who shows up just once, it doesn't hurt to think for a second and ask, what do they want? Why do they get up in the morning? And even if they don't know themselves, not knowing and wanting to know is good enough as a motivation. Wanting to find out where you belong in this world. You could write entire novels about a character seeking the answer to that question. What do I want? I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to nowadays. And just asking that is like lighting a fire, striking a match. These characters suddenly glow and grow warm. There's a life in there, a desire. It is like winding back a toy and feeling the pressure of that spring as you wind it back. And when you release that little toy, it moves on its own, and it goes, and it's alive now. Sometimes people need a little extra winding up. But everyone ultimately wants something. And I think you would do your characters a disservice if you didn't at least think for a second about what they wanted. Because the things we want puts us in the road of calamity and the road of struggle. And this right here is what I find to be a really good starting point to making really complex characters. Because you go from just having a person who is at times a vehicle for the story, let's be honest, a character who just enables the story to happen. They go from being that to being someone who wants something. And then when you start to think about that, you ask questions like, who are they willing to share this secret with? Is this character so afraid that if they merely utter what they want, it will fly away like a butterfly freed from their grasp? A kind of jinx where the instant you state what you want, it ceases to exist? What would make a character think stuff like that? What could they possibly want that they would be afraid of mentioning? And what about the opposite? What about the kind of character who would talk about their goals and dreams proudly, boldly? Sometimes as a kind of spell. If they keep saying it, maybe it will become true. And if they tell everyone, maybe they'll be held accountable for it and they'll work harder. Simply having goals can make a character be more complex. Because they're not just someone who exists in this stage that we build through the story. It's not just a prop in the background, it's an actor. Someone giving an amazing performance, full of emotion, full of feeling. I have more I want to say, but I do think that if you're just starting out creating characters, giving yourself the freedom and the reminder that they might change during the story is very important, as is staying away from tropes, as is injecting in them a little bit of humanity. But if you want more advice on how to make a character believable, then we ought to move over to the second question of the day. Someone wanted my advice on writing, and I'm holding quotation fingers, believable characters. Now, I like this question because it is what you may call a loaded question. What makes a character believable? I think that this varies from person to person. Everyone has different thresholds as to what they're willing to believe and what they're not. Some writers might tell you that in order for a character to be believable, they have to be funny or virtuous or flawed. And I don't think these are wrong. What I do think is that at the core of all of this, a character becomes believable and becomes relatable when they show elements that we can find inside of ourselves. When a character shows feelings, desires, virtues, and flaws that we can find in ourselves or in a different version of ourselves, the kind of person we were in the past, or the kind of person we wish to be in the future, we become able to believe in these characters, in them being more than just characters, letters, little black shapes across the white canvas. I do think that a certain degree of humanity is required for a character to be believable. I mean, when a character has goals, and when a character shows that they are more than, as I mentioned, the vehicle for the story. I think that when you really give a character a chance to shine, this shine, we could call it, can illuminate the reader's mind and help them grow close. I really do think so. And I'm not saying all those other answers are wrong. I think they're all part of the same answer. The character has to be human in a way. Human beings are funny. Human beings can sometimes be virtuous and can sometimes be flawed. Human beings have goals and dreams and passions. And God, are we good at making short-sighted decisions at the worst possible time. We are really good at that. I think that the most organic way to go about doing this is to always give your characters the benefit of the doubt. To let them be who they are on the page, even if that surprises you. I remember this one instance in college where everyone at the feedback table felt a particular way about a scene. Let's just say that we were giving feedback to a particular person, and this person gave us a scene to review. And we all thought the scene was going to go a different way because of the way that the character had been presented and the way that the character had behaved before and everything that had led up to that moment. And when 4 other people all agreed that the ultimate resolution of the story and the character's choice makes no sense based on what we had heard of them before, the writer of that particular piece replied with, "I thought about that, but I didn't like that, so I made them do this instead." Which really brings me to the next point that, listen, sometimes our characters are going to do things that we don't agree with. Sometimes they're going to do things that we don't like. But putting words in their mouth, even though sometimes you're doing it to advance the plot, or, to force a particular trait, unless you do a really good job, they might end up feeling forced, because you are, at the end of the day, forcing a character to be in a particular way. And I know that someone out there is gonna yell at me. I can already see the YouTube comment. It's my story, I can make my characters behave however I want. And that's true. It's your story. You can write it however you want. But you have to keep in mind that characters evolve on the page. And although it may seem wise to wrangle them up and give them a short leash, sometimes it's best to let them run freely. I find that those are the times where characters really surprise me and really wow me. And I mean, if I'm surprised and I am wowed, then maybe the reader will be too. Now, that's really it. A believable character is a character that shows a facet of our very own humanity. We believe in them because we believe in the shards of them that we see in ourselves. I want to give you a weird example of a character that I found believable and likable in a story where they almost feel as though they don't fit. I'm reading a story right now. I'm reading this novel. And I'm having a hard time enjoying this novel. This novel, I find, sometimes is a little pretentious. Not even in a good way. But I am pushing through this novel because there is a character who I find to be an absolute riot. This novel involves a Navy commander who speaks in the most hilarious way possible, and who may appear so unbelievable as to be completely out of place, and yet the presentation by the author is so effective. Way more than the protagonist and the supporting cast, this one character has so much strength and so much faith put behind them that I'm pushing through this novel that I otherwise do not enjoy, because I am hoping there is more of that Navy commander, because he is the funniest. I can almost imagine the feedback. No, I can almost imagine the author at their desk imagining, is the Navy commander too silly? Is he too silly? But that's what he talks like. Should I just not make him talk like that? Because it would make more sense? But then it wouldn't be him anymore. And I don't know what the editor thought, but I want to thank all of them, the feedbackers and the editor, for not stopping this part of the story, because the Navy commander is the funniest thing. I am pushing through this novel that I am not enjoying, because I want more of that character. It's so funny. And someone out there might argue, but it's so out of place, Max. I think it's completely in place. And I think that in a story that is otherwise very, 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 very sad, this character that brings an element of levity to it is irreplaceable. But I understand how someone else can look at that character and dislike them, and not find them believable, or likable, or believable. Did I repeat the same word twice? It's fine, don't think about it. I understand how someone else might not like it. And this goes back to the first point, that everyone has different thresholds. And for me, that character being hilarious was a good thing. I did not see that as a bad thing. But I see how someone else can. And the thing is this, we can't control how other people are going to react to our characters. Some are going to like them for things that have nothing to do with what we put on the page. And sometimes people will hate them for something completely unrelated to the writing. Maybe they just don't like that particular type of character. But we can't get to the good. We can't get to people loving our characters if we don't put a little bit of humanity in them. Just a little bit of the elements that we see in ourselves. Maybe I really like that commander because I too like being silly sometimes. Humanity is the key to effective characters, because it plays upon one of humanity's greatest strengths, empathy. To feel for others, to relate to others, and to grow close to others. That right there, I think, is the trick. And so, with the questions out of the way, it's time for us to move into the final segment of the show, the prompt. Every week, I give you a weird exercise or a character question, which happens to be the case today. I give you a chance for you to think about writing, and I tell you what I would have done. Today's prompt, we're sticking to the character questions, mostly because we talked about characters today, and I'm kind of on a character question roll. Today, you get a 2 for 1 today. Because today's character question is very simple. A test of character. A test of virtue. I want you to go character by character in the story that you're working on. Or just take the main character if you want. And I want you to answer the following question. What would this character do? How would their life change if they suddenly found themselves the owner of an enormous wealth. If you would like a number, let's say $1 million, or 1 million golden coins, or whatever currency your setting happens to have. If you are in a setting without currency, then an equivalent amount of wealth. How does this change them? How does this change them as a person? What's different about them now? If they just had this seemingly infinite amount of money, and I know that $1 million is not seemingly infinite, but I want you to imagine what $1 million looks like. But take that example. A whole lot of money. Your character just stumbled backwards into a big pile of money. There may be repercussions. There may be something that may fall upon them for having this. But for now, it's all rubies and roses. How does the money change them? Is it for the better? Is it for the worse? How would they spend the money? Everyone loves to do this little mental exercise. Everyone loves to play this little game. How would they spend the money? Who would they spend it on? And what part of them, in spite of all this wealth and all this power, would remain the same? Now, I promised that I would give you a twofer, so here comes the 2-for-1 prompts. Because I came upon this prompt with another idea. Because this is a character question. I had a prompt to go with it. And I'm just going to slide it under the door. No setup, no nothing. I had an idea for a story. And in this story, the main character is paid a lot of money just to interact with a person. This person just pays them bucket loads of money to hang out with them. You take that and figure out where that goes. Is our character special? Is that other person special? Is that money real? Is this happening somewhere else? What does it mean? Why all the money? And what's our character doing with it? You play with that. Make it magical, make it mundane, you do you, okay? Now, that's it. Pause the video now if you need to think, if you need to take notes, if you want to go and leave a comment, pause now. You can keep washing dishes, walking your dog, laying in bed, enjoying a moment of silence in an otherwise busy day. Think of storytelling, of characters. And now, let's talk about last week. Last week, I described a character question, a character moment, about a moment of quiet loneliness. Waking up early, sitting at the dinner table while the sun has yet to come up. There's that chilly sting of early morning, that coolness in the air. My favorite time of day, really. And the question was to imagine your characters and to wonder how they would feel like in this situation. And I'm still writing the story that I was writing last week. So let's go through them again. C, B, and D. Those are not their real names, but they're good enough for now. I think that C, who has been through a lot, I mean, let's be real, she's been through a lot. She probably would hate that moment of quietness. If anything, because she barely gets any sleep as it is, so I think that her waking up at 5 in the morning would probably be the last thing on her mind. I almost imagine her doing that not out of some need to want to get work done, but rather being unable to sleep at night. Which is, mood. But I imagine her sitting at the dining table in her house, looking miserable. I imagine her with the elbows resting on the table. Her forehead might as well be parallel to the ground. I imagine her being miserable. If anything, because it's up early, she's getting no sleep. It's cold. You know where it's not cold? Under the covers. And I imagine her doing all of that introspection that she hates. She gets plenty of introspection in the novel. Like, to the point where, like, I can almost feel a joke coming where she is gonna just say in narration that she's looking forward to not thinking about her life for like a week. I think she would hate it. Now, over with B. Now, if there is an early riser, it's B. B is productive, high energy. Is it type blood A? I think so. I don't know. Listen, I imagine her up early. I imagine her at her place, probably on the couch, being entirely honest, and I imagine her ready for work. She doesn't go to work until 7, but it's 5 in the morning. She is ready. She is all dressed up. She's had coffee. She's had breakfast. She's on the couch. She's playing games, because this is how you get in the extra hours. To be able to really complete hundreds of games a year. That's my girl B right there. She's living the life. Listen, she's getting up early to play more games. That's the life. That's like being a kid. Waking up early on Saturday morning to watch more cartoons. That's the kind of energy that I wish I had in real life. But, I mean, B's got that. B's got that. So, like, that was easy. I'm like, what's B doing early in the morning? Playing more games. Duh. Now, let's move over to Chaos Energy, also known as D. Would D even get up early? I mean, if they had to get up early, I imagine D. I imagine them being. I mean, they're not a morning person at all. They have a morning job, but I mean, if there's someone who has that, like, the darkness under their eyes, the droopy face, has a coffee that says "Don't talk to me" or "I'll stab you," that's D. Don't talk to me or I'll stab you. That's the... Someone make that cup. Has like the knife emoji on it. That's D. But I mean, once they get their coffee, they're fine. They're jumping around. I almost imagine them... I mean, they have to be at home because of the prompt. Imagine them at home, at the table. Probably... I can't say that. That would be a spoiler. Doing work. Maybe paging through a magazine. I see them as the kind of person who waits for the time when a friend would be getting up to give them a call. Or the kind of friend who would actually give you the wake-up call. Who would, call you and be like, "Hey, how you doing? Good morning. Hey, put me on speakerphone." And then just starts talking to them. Because D loves talking to people. And there you go. That prompt is so fun. It's so fun because it forces you to look at your characters in a situation that you otherwise wouldn't experience in the story. Listen, a lot of this story happens at night. So characters waking up at 5 in the morning really doesn't fit. So I had fun thinking about this. I'm going to tell you about how these characters would react to having $1 million on the next episode. For now, I want to tell you this, okay? It's very easy to worry. Worry about the story, worry about the plot twists, the big reveal, and about characters. Are people gonna like my characters? Are they gonna find them believable? You can spend a lot of time worrying about this. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but what I believe is this. If you let the characters bloom on the page, if you let them be human, if you let them want things, and when they change before you, you don't stop them. You let them take upon the colors that are their own. I would like to believe that people will see the humanity in them and recognize a part of themselves in those characters. And although there is no guarantee that they will like them, it is likely that they will understand them. And I want to believe, because everyone has different tastes and different thresholds, I want to believe that your reader will love at least one of them. One of these characters will speak to them in a way you could have never foreseen. And even if it's just one, I think to find a new best friend on the page, that is absolutely worth it. And so, welcome to episode 40 of my writing advice and inspiration podcast, OMAKASE. I have been your host, Max, also known as M. Karen. I hope that today was fun, insightful, and if anything, I hope that I was good company during the little free time that you have that you chose to spend with me. Okay? Writing's hard, but if we keep at it, I am certain that we will arrive where we're meant to be. Thank you for listening. I want to wish you the best. And before I step over to the end of the video club, I want to remind you all that if you really enjoy this podcast, please consider leaving a 5-star rating on iTunes. Ratings and reviews are the number one way in which a small podcast like this can continue to grow. So if you really enjoy the show, please consider leaving a rating. It would mean a lot. And with that, let's head over to the shoutouts. Hey, you don't have to keep on listening if you don't wanna. I'm just gonna do shoutouts and be silly. I'm not allowed to do edits here either. So, hey, thank you for listening. I don't have anything else to say. I forgot to open Patreon and Coffee. I am very professional. I sat down today, and I honestly think that I'm getting a little sick. I think I'm getting a little sick. I don't know how. I don't go out. Except on Friday to watch Endgame, the only showing was at 10:50 at night. Are you kidding me? If you want to support me and what I do, please consider going to coffee.com/mkaren and patreon.com/mkaren. And you can get cool perks and a shout out like the following people, starting with the lovely people of Coffee, ko-fi.com/mkaren, beginning with Vic, Das Donya, Lishadra, Angela, Kristen Lofton, Sylvia Leitilla, and Polly Craftwell. Thank you all for your support. And now, over to Patreon, we have Rival Moonlight, Soul Muse, Lacey, calling me out on my lies, Lacey. I'm never gonna finish all of my to-be-read books, Lacey. Irina Phoenix, Lacey, if that is your real name. Irina Phoenix. A. Howard. Alisa Dudley. Heather is writing. Nicola. I'm really close to the mic today. Nicola. Brenda. Amelia. Pat Eichson. Melanie Ashford. Shido Tsubasa, Alex Cast, Alistair Baywood, Caitlin, Blarg, Kameshwar Rao Shaluri, Kathy Lindsay, Kaylee, Mary Foster Smith, Juan Nunes, Raquel Fernandez, Janos Hebatsky, Sky D. White, Rene Solia, Connor, Jay Suwiki, Rhiannon August, Nicolay, what was that accent? Nicolay, J. Tana Kirkwood, James, I gotta turn away from the mic for a second. Aerosols! I hope that wasn't too loud. Noam Zohar. Novels and tomes. Kiel. Lier Kilo. Clem Pastor. I said that as though like I was looking through the menu at a restaurant and I was like, oh, I didn't know they had Clem Pastor on the menu. Oh, this is fancy. Ooh, Clem Pastor. Ooh. Nicole Grissom. Biting the Sun. Christiane. Okay, so if I get an order of Clem Pastor, will you guys... Okay, that... I was gonna make that bit of like, hey, if I get some fries, will you get some fries? Will you eat some fries, you know? And then I realized that we're talking about a person, and that makes it sound really weird. Anyhow. Patrons are not food. Shimmer Tales. Amanda Stevens. Zero Woods. K.M. Anderson. And... Alexa Hoshi. Hey guys, how y'all doing? I got a new notification. Who's yelling at me on the internet? Oh, that thing. It's fine. It's fine. So what is the worst thing about running a YouTube channel? The worst thing about running a YouTube channel is that you get people who either A, are asking questions, or B, making offering feedback on the video / format on videos that came out like 5 years ago. And I'm like, homie, just check the posted date. Like, come on. I had someone complaining about the variety of the music in the Virtual Writing Academy from like 5 years. That's not true. Like 4 years ago. Come on. That one I found to be really silly. Because, like, I read that comment and I thought, oof, this fool doesn't know. Gee. The other one is people asking a very specific question. And not a question about, like, how do you write the first sentence? But they're like, hey, do you know if Scrivener works on a Chromebook? And I hate those questions. Because my first instinct is, my dude, you can just Google that. Homie, you can just Google that. Like, you don't have to ask me. You don't have to ask my video from 3 years ago. That's life. That's the part of running any kind of online business. Sometimes you get the really silly comments, and more often than not, though, you get the really touching comments. I want to give a shout out to all the wonderful people leaving comments on the podcast and adding me on Twitter. Listen. Comment sections are usually trash fires because anonymity allows people to say things that they would never tell you to your face because you could punch their face. But I am at least glad that the people who are commenting regularly are so lovely and so sweet. And no one's asking me really obvious questions. I knew someone who would reply to questions like that on Facebook with a "let me Google that for you" link. Which, I don't know if those are still around. Maybe I should just do that. No, I shouldn't. You know why? Because I would just be wasting hours of my life replying to comments with a link to "let me Google that." Where instead I could just read books. Reading Matilda. I'm reading that book about the Navy officer. It's not about him, but it really should be. He's the best character in that novel, which is the saddest thing. I'm reading a book on gender that someone recommended to me, which is really good so far. Really witty, which I appreciate. I was afraid it was going to be a dry novel. But no, it's witty. I appreciate that. What else I'm reading? I'm reading Matilda. Did I already mention Matilda? I don't think I did. I'm reading a weird book. What a way to describe it, Max. I write books for a living. You see, the description is very important. It was a weird book. I am not ready to talk about the names of any of these. If I do end up posting reviews, I'll probably just make them like image reviews so that I don't post a long thread because people hate long threads. Keep an eye on my Twitter. I might post reviews on them on there. I don't know if I will. It might happen. It might not happen. Hey. For now, though, I've got to get a move on. I'm recording this on my lovely wife's birthday. So if you're listening to this like several days after, feel free to still leave my wife a happy birthday. I will relay all of those happy birthday wishes over to my wife. For now, I hope that wherever you are, you're having a lovely day. Life is hard, and writing is too, because writing emulates life. Sometimes we have bad days, sometimes we have bad weeks or bad years, but what matters the most is that we keep getting up, and we keep on fighting. Is it hard? Yes. Is it impossible? No. You're not the first one to struggle this way. The blank page is not your nemesis. It is your ally, and it is testing you. Step into the story. No matter how scary, the first sentence is the worst. From there on, the writing will be easier, even if just a little. Stay strong. Take deep breaths whenever you're unsure. And remember, today is a good day to write.